Welcome to episode 3 of the Ruck Around and Find Out podcast. I'm Justin Harris, aka Judicious Nomad. Mrs. Judicious Nomad is actually helping me film this episode today. I'm excited to be with you, and I apologize for the delay. Things have been kind of crazy. Today's episode is going to be entitled The One-Off Guy, How a High-Stakes Trial Lawyer Learns What Not to Carry. For those of you that were with us last time, or really for those of you joining us for the first time, let me kind of reintroduce the show. The show tagline is Trial, Trauma, and Triumph. The real question with this show is going to be when the weight gets really heavy and maybe it even knocks you down, do you lie down, do you stay on the ground, or do you get up and keep rucking, notwithstanding the weight? This is all about my journey back from a traumatic brain injury on 12/26/22. Let me give you a little bit of background for some of you that are joining us for the first time. I've been a trial lawyer for more than 27 years. And I'd really like to think of myself, or I'd like to think of myself as a slightly less violent Ray Donovan, for those of you familiar with the show. The difference is, instead of being a fixer in Hollywood, I'm a fixer in the courtroom. And I do actually operate within the bounds of the law. And so as part of that process, though, I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of how I became sort of the one-off guy and what that looks like for some of you that maybe don't know me or want to learn more about this. The purpose of the podcast, though, is really to try and inspire you, and in particular, to inspire you to get up when life knocks you down. To recap very briefly, when I had that accident back on 12/26/22, I really felt like I was kind of at the prime of my career. I had just finished a month-long trial, and I didn't quite know what that meant for me, whether I'd be able to continue going. And then in 2024, I started rucking. In September of 2024 specifically, and I think this morning might have been either day 542 or day 543 of nonstop continuous rucking. I ruck every day with a Go Ruck Rucker 4.0. I started with the Training Weight Vest 2.0, and I generally ruck with 40 pounds. Sometimes when I'm not doing well physically or emotionally, I want to let you know that I do drop a little bit of weight. And so one of the things we're going to talk about today, though, is what is some of the weight that you're carrying, and how can I kind of help you to learn what not to carry. So let's kind of dive in now. And also I want to throw out before we really get going that on the podcast, I'm intending to have some guests. I've already got some great people lined up. And they are people who are going to talk to us about some of the different challenges that they've had and how they basically got back up when life knocked them down. And it might be physical things or challenges. They might be financial challenges. They could be almost anything. And that's what we're going to, kind of be focused on with this podcast. Again, to kind of help you keep going. So what I'd like to talk about too now is kind of how I became the one-off trial gladiator, if you will. And first, I should probably explain this by letting you know that there's a difference between what I consider trial lawyers and litigators. Sometimes you hear both of those terms, and you might think that they are synonymous or interchangeable, much like attorney and lawyer would be interchangeable, at least in the U.S. And that's just not the case. A trial lawyer is a person who actually tries cases. That means I go to court, and my practice is fairly broad. I'm really kind of a trial specialist, is the way I like to think of it, because I try things in state court, in federal court, in bankruptcy court, and within that state court, I try things in the probate area. I try things in family law. There's just all kinds of stuff that I'm dealing with. And so how I kind of became this trial gladiator of sorts is I had the benefit of starting at a firm back in 1998 when I was first licensed. And at the very beginning, they used to refer to me as Depot Man, in fact, because I was literally taking about 400 depositions a year. And you're like, wait, that is more than one deposition per day. Well, yes, and some of those depositions might have been in cases where there might have been multiple depositions in one day. For example, like in a construction defect case or something. There could have been several depositions. But that's what I did really for the first 2 or 3 years of my practice. And then I changed firms and went to really sort of a bankruptcy boutique where I was in charge of the bankruptcy-related litigation in addition to doing some other kinds of litigation. As part of that, one of the things that I would do is I worked on one case in particular, a large Chapter 11, where I personally filed about 632 adversary proceedings. And you want to think of that as like complaints, different lawsuits, and that's just what they call them in the bankruptcy arena. And I sort of managed those cases. And that really kind of set me off on a strong footing. In 2006, I moved to a different firm to focus on doing more trial work and not be quite as limited as I was when I was working at that bankruptcy boutique. And it was during that process, and because of the vast experience that I had, I tried a case my first year, which is really tough, I would note, for attorneys to get kind of trial experience, especially young ones today, because the partners and other more senior lawyers tend to kind of take that away from some of these, younger attorneys. And so as part of that, what I had an opportunity to do, though, was just a different time, is I was trying cases statewide. I've probably appeared in 30 plus out of, I think it might be 56 counties in California. Sometimes I get that wrong, 52, 56. I think it's 56. And so I had a great opportunity to actually try a lot of cases and handle a lot of very complex matters. It was in this process that I kind of became this one-off guy where other attorneys would kind of approach me, and still do to this day, to talk to me about different things that are going on and refer stuff to me that basically doesn't fit in an easy box. And so let me talk to you a little bit about sort of the kinds of weight that I carry as a trial lawyer. And I should go back for a second here, and I'm sure you can follow this. Your litigators are basically people that might be involved in the litigation process, which is the process by which matters are brought to trial. But a lot of times your litigators never actually try cases, or they spend very little time actually trying cases. And that's the difference, is that I have that experience and I do that, and it's something that, frankly, I really enjoy. So let me talk to you a little bit more about some of the different kinds of cases that I like to handle and what sort of established my reputation as this kind of one-off guy. In a general sense, I'm dealing with everything that I do is largely high-stakes litigation, meaning we're dealing with things that might involve very traumatic injuries of all kinds of types that are occurring to people, for example, or happening to people. For example, sexual assault or other sort of high-stakes things. A lot of my adversaries, or the people that I bring these cases against, might be institutions. They might be, all sorts of different things like that, companies. And then I'm also, so part of this is that I tend to handle matters where it's sort of the bet the farm type litigation. And it's in that context, in fact, that I've really had to kind of develop and figure out ways that I could better deal with some of those kinds of very emotionally draining and complex, cognitively draining matters, and that's been sort of really hard sometimes. And it can kind of weigh on you. I've been accused before of doing what they refer to as kind of like whistling past the graveyard. You may have heard this term before. And generally, what that refers to is those of us that are willing to take unusual risks. And that is something that does take both an emotional toll as well as a physical toll on you. It can also take somewhat of a professional toll on you. I have represented some very unpopular people or very unpopular companies as well, and it has done things in this high stakes world that I dwell in. It has gotten me sued, and that's on top of just dealing with already very challenging matters emotionally and otherwise, and very complex matters that are just super draining. And so one of the things that so there is this sort of downside. There's a toll that you pay for being willing to engage in some of these different matters that are incredibly taxing on you. So one of the things that I've really had to learn to do in this process, of course, is I've sort of, kind of had to learn basically what not to carry, and that there might be things that I maybe shouldn't carry, and I'll explain. So one of the things that I've kind of had to learn, and let me kind of explain sort of how I've changed things up. So we had my accident back in December, specifically December 26, 2022. And when I had that accident, at that time, the firm was much smaller. I had just lost an associate that I had, and I believe at the time I mainly had me, a legal secretary, and a receptionist, not even sure that I had at that time that I really even had an additional paralegal, or I may have had one paralegal. But in light of the significant caseload that I carry and the nature of these very complex matters that I typically deal with, it was a lot. And then add to that, as we talked about in prior episodes, that I was dealing with some challenges, not just physical challenges and rehabbing for the first half of 2023, my physical injuries, but about 6 months in, that's when I also developed post-concussion syndrome and had some real hard challenges that I had to deal with as a result. And we've talked about that some in prior episodes. And so, when you kind of have those things happen, it sort of helps you, you kind of realize, if you will, that, hey, I probably need to make some changes if I'm going to survive this. In fact, I remember that I was so concerned that the day after my accident, while I was still in the hospital, I actually had Colette, aka Mrs. Judicious Nomad, bring my laptop to the hospital so that we could submit payroll. And so thankfully, and with the help of some wonderful groups, a wonderful company in particular known as CRISP out of Atlanta, I joined them and joined forces with them, if you will, in August of 2024. And they are sort of the preeminent coaching and I would say really law firm owner strategist people that help you to scale, and they only work with law firms. So yes, they're that crazy. But in that process, they taught us some things about hiring and other things that I should not be spending my time doing instead of trying to do everything that I was doing, which was probably a little bit crazy. And so as part of that process, the way that it works now, so if you go to beginning in about February of 25 and more so by June of 2025, we essentially, over the last, not even quite a year, we basically tripled the size of the firm, where now we have 4 paralegals, 2 legal secretaries, and an associate attorney that is able to help me. And they're great people, and we spent an enormous amount of kind of time and energy and money getting the right group of people. sometime, if you ever had the opportunity, if you're in the neighborhood or you're in town, feel free to swing by our office in Fresno. We'll give you an art tour. We literally have some pretty amazing art. And as part of that, I like to think of it that we selected the people that we have here much like we, curate our art. We did it carefully and deliberately and invested and continue to invest in our people. And so now, and really over about the last year, I'm not sure that I've drafted any documents, for example, from scratch. And it allows me really to focus on, not be focusing on the administrative tasks as much as focusing on the kind of meatier, weightier matters, if you will, where I can actually just focus on making sure that I've got the right people and I can spend less time grinding and more time kind of overseeing and strategizing, because that's where I really excel. One of the things that we do here for anybody that really meets with me is we often whiteboard them, as we say, where we take them into the other conference room. We have a very large whiteboard, and I kind of map out the strategy and the approach that I think that we need to take for their particular matter, whatever it is. And then I let them take some pictures, because we're not quite digital on that front yet. And then we kind of move it forward that way. And so one of the smart things I've had to do, and it was really by necessity. So in some ways, my accident of December 2022 was really a blessing to me, in the sense that it made me reconsider some of the things that I am historically or have been historically doing, and moving those things off to other people that can handle them, frankly, probably better than I can. And the goal is to get to a point where the law firm essentially runs without me. So I still want to be involved, but I want to just kind of do the high level work where I am spending time with clients and helping them to develop and helping them to sort of get great results for them, really through the trial process. And so one of the things that I've also done in that is I've made sure that I kind of went back to my strongman and powerlifting roots, if you will, in that I am not necessarily competing anymore in those arenas. However, I recognized that I really needed to up my personal game in terms of taking care of my body, and that's really the bigger point. And I've kind of, while it started perhaps of necessity, I mean, I've always worked out, but now it's kind of next level in that I really prioritize the self-care, whether it's the transcendental meditation that I'm doing or the physical activities, and then certainly, as you know, because I've been rucking for the last 540 plus days. And so, I intend to continue doing that, but it's really that in order to combat and deal with some of the stresses and challenges, I've just learned that for me, it was critical that I actually make sure that I am keeping my body, and this, I've also upped my nutrition game, and I'm doing all kinds of great things, because I realized that I could not continue to run at that pace. And it was actually the accident, I think, that kind of slowed me down a little bit and made me get real about my health and prioritize that more than perhaps I had before. So what I'd really like to shift to a little bit is to kind of think about, some sort of questions, if you will, for some of you who may be similarly situated. And it doesn't mean you have to be lawyers necessarily. But one of the questions, I think, is to consider, what are the things that I'm currently doing? What are the weights that I'm currently carrying that I really don't need to carry? And I talked about this recently in a reel, and I think this is kind of a fantastic idea, that I think most of us need an elimination diet, not necessarily from any particular food, but we need to really take a hard look and consider, what are the things that are really serving us and what are the things that are not serving us. And this could be everything from making sure that we're increasing our sleep. This could be, making sure that we are, prioritizing sleep, which I found for me, is a night and day difference. And it could be in part, usually I think as you get older, supposedly you don't need as much sleep. But me, particularly because I still think there's some recovery that my brain is doing, I generally try and get about 7 hours a night. And one of the things that I've had to learn to do is to try and go to bed earlier and then simply get up earlier. And if I can, I try and make sure that I get my rucking in first thing in the morning, because I think that's just a fantastic way to start the day. And I could do a whole episode about all the different benefits of rucking. But I think that's something that you need to think about, though, in your life. Are there groups that you're a part of? Are there commitments that maybe you no longer feel the fire to be involved, or they're placing too much stress on you or taking away from precious family time that you may have, for example, if you're raising a young family? Are there also, for those of you that are professionals and those of you that perhaps are lawyers, are there cases that you're doing that are exerting too much weight on you, that are making things too hard for you? And do you really need to carry those? Maybe we refer those out. Maybe you refer them to a guy like me that handles the weird stuff. And I don't mean this in an adversarial way, but maybe you try and just sort of stay in your lane and just do the stuff you're doing. Doesn't mean that you have to vary what you're doing. Likewise, even if you're in some other kind of business, are there particular types of things that you're doing in that business that you really don't enjoy doing, that you could, for example, pay someone else to do? Are you trying to be the proverbial jack of all trades? Are you trying to handle all the administrative things as well as other things in your business? With technology today, with AI, there are so many things that you can get additional help in that you don't need to really be doing yourself anymore. So I'd like to kind of wrap up today's podcast by suggesting that, or my challenge to you is going to be, what is that one piece of weight that you're carrying right now that you need to let go of? I mean, maybe it's something like a relationship that doesn't serve you. Maybe it's a particular job that you hate. Maybe it's something else that you're involved in that you don't need to be involved in, that is just stressing you out. There's something in your life right now, and just me asking the question, what's that one piece of weight that you should not carry, or that you know you need to let go of? You already know what that is. I don't know what it is for you, but I know that there's something that you need to let go of. So that's pretty much going to be episode 3. So to review, there are costs to everything that we do, but you ultimately are in control of the weight that you choose to carry. Do you maybe need to make some better choices, be more discriminating in your choices, choose something better, to do or not do, as the case may be? I would encourage any of you that maybe need help, that want to sort of verbalize some of these concerns, if you will. Feel free to DM me on Instagram or send me a Facebook message, or shoot, you can even email me at jdh@judiciousnomad.com and let me know what you're dealing with, and if I can help you, I certainly will. Maybe you just need a chance to tell somebody else that's not, like your partner or somebody like that. You just want to get that off your chest, whatever it is that's really bugging you. Feel free to reach out to me and let me know. And I'm happy to kind of help you through that process. Sometimes just telling somebody that you're not, married to or in business with can make a real difference. And so that, my friends, is episode 3 of Ruck Around and Find Out. And we will see you next time.